Hi guys, Jake Wilson here, hope you're well. Today we're going to be looking at approach tones and chromatic enclosures. Just an introduction to these two topics, by the way. You can go quite down the rabbit hole with them, but I'm going to give you the starting point, and you can go and do all your own work because this is a subject that leads itself to many permutations, many fingerings, and so on and so on. Okay, so a chromatic approach tone, I should have said, is where you use the lower or upper chromatic neighbor to the pitch that you're targeting to preempt it. Is that a good definition? I hope so. Let's say we're playing an A. Very simply, our chromatic approach tones are going to either be the lower neighbor or the upper chromatic neighbor. Simple enough, right? But obviously that sounds a bit strange, out of context. So let's apply it to an arpeggio. Again, these things might start to resemble other things harmonically, but just in our heads, for now, let's just think of it as a chromatic approach tone. We're going to play an A minor arpeggio, and we're going to chromatically approach the root. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, of course. There are other names for that arpeggio, but we're just thinking about it that way for now, okay? Now we're going to do this, but for the third as well. Now the extra notes made that sound a bit rhythmically weird. So to carry on, let's try a chromatic approach for all of the notes. So the first, the third, and the fifth. Okay, now this is starting to sound a little bit more familiar. Of course, you can do this in the opposite direction, but that sounds very strange for this particular example, until you might think, well, that's all cool, why don't we do a double approach? So a double chromatic approach, if that's the right word. It's a little bit crowded all of a sudden. So as you can already sense, how you approach this will give you all kinds of different rhythmic results, but also different sort of harmonic implications. If you have a double descending approach tone, it actually sounds pretty cool. So for the sake of clarity, I've just kept all of the approaching tones on the same string as the landing tone. But of course you can mess around with different fingerings, whatever is appropriate. Now, of course, the rhythmic placement of this stuff is important too, as to how it sounds. You could have it so that you're anticipating and playing the target pitch on the strong beat. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Or you could have the approach tones on the strong beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. Both different sounds, both cool, both have their sort of interesting implications. And this stuff is all over genres like gypsy jazz, where you hear people doing stuff like that a lot. And it's a really nice sound. Of course, you can use these on multiple tonalities. You could use it on a major 7. But as we've already said, there was a little problem because we started to get a bit crowded here, where we were also implying a kind of dominant 7 sound. For some reason, it's not so much of a problem on the major 3rd, for example, because our ears are probably contextually primed to hear it wanting to go that way. But this major 7 in this context is so weak that it's wanting to go all the way up to the root. So, you know, there are kind of good and bad, or not bad, but less good, less strong, if you want, versions of these configurations. Okay, so we've looked at chromatic approaches. Now let's look at chromatic enclosures. And a chromatic enclosure, essentially, the way I think about it, is a kind of double approach. And it's where you go, let's say we're starting from below pitch. It means that we come near to pitch, go above it, and then come back down and land. There are so many configurations of these that can incorporate, different spans, different tonalities, some that work really nicely on certain things, some that don't work so well on other things. But we're just going to have a look at a few different ways of doing this. So for example, let's start with a chromatic approach to A, but we're going to miss the A, we're going to leapfrog, and then come back down. Or we could do a double type enclosure where we go. It's really common. We could then extend that chromatic enclosure. There's so many versions of this that the potential for this technique goes crazy. And this is all over bebop, all over jazz. It doesn't have to be a root, it could be the third that people are doing this on. Again, certain enclosures work better for certain harmonies, for certain pitches, you name it. There's a lot of things to consider. But the really important thing to note is that these can be exceptionally handy things for just having under your hand to get you to the notes and to elongate phrases, which can be useful rhythmically. So if you've got loads of these under your fingers, it means that you can put that pitch wherever you want if you're in that area. So if you wanted to land your A, like the root, if you like, of whatever we're doing, on beat one, but your run is kind of meandering a bit and you've got some space to fill, you can use this as a kind of delaying device, so you can put that A wherever you want it. And it could be, or just, all of these things you can use whatever ones are going to work. Now these might not leap into your improvisational playing, but they are exceptionally useful and I'd recommend you practice them. So how do we practice them? This is a really good question because I think the first thing you have to do really is have a kind of catalogue of ways in which these chromatic approaches can work, and then use them on loads of different sorts of arpeggios and make notes of which ones work. And then you can start messing around with how you finger these. So, if you're playing that A, let's do it A over here. So if you're playing and you want to get to the A, you could go, there's all sorts of different ways that this can help you. I don't know, that sounds a bit convoluted as I play it then, but having multiple fingerings of things can certainly help, especially in the G and B areas where the major third interval might come into play a bit more. So what do I mean by that? I mean this kind of thing. So let's look at how I practice these using an arpeggio. I might take this enclosure. And yeah, that lovely tension that you get with these as you approach the note, it's quite nice. It's kind of it's a 5 chord all on its own, because you've got, and I think that's probably why these figures are also used quite a lot in walking bass too. Anyway, I digress. I might use this sort of thing. And if you like, you can try different things on different bits of the arpeggio. Let's try this enclosure on the third. Slightly awkward, but it might work for you. Again, there's tons and tons of things that you can do with this. Tons of ways this can be explored in terms of expression. It's just a really useful thing to have at your disposal when you're coming up with lines, when you're writing melodies. And yeah, it's a wonderful thing to get creative with. Okay, so that was your introduction to chromatic enclosures and chromatic approach tones. Loads and loads of stuff that you can mess around with in there. So thanks again for watching, guys. If you enjoyed that, please leave a comment or give us a like or subscribe if you haven't already and you want to keep up with all these lessons. As usual, I've left a link in the description box to all my JTC products. These are lesson packages that go into loads and loads of detail, much more than I can do on these videos. And yeah, they're made with a lot of love and care. And if you support me on there, that's great because it keeps me doing all this stuff. So thanks again for watching, guys, and take it easy.